the heart of a bustling city where power and justice often overlap. The life of a prestigious military general, Jonathan Harris, is suddenly threatened by the arrogance and abuse of power of Police Chief Robert Turner. A peaceful evening at a fancy restaurant becomes an arena for the battle between justice and injustice. When a wrongdoing is exposed, Jonathan's dark secrets and determination will lead the story to spectacular developments, deep the message of equality and courage. Let's explore this emotional journey. Thank you for being here. If you like this content, don't forget to like, share this story with friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories. The luxurious restaurant on the main street of the city is famous for its tranquility in class. The sparkling crystal lights create an elegant atmosphere where the rich and powerful often come to enjoy dinner. Today, a guest appeared here, Mr. Jonathan Harris. Jonathan Harris, a black man in his 60s, walked into the restaurant with a calm demeanor. His silver hair reflected the soft light from the chandeliers. He wore a simple but elegant suit with a classic watch on his wrist, the only symbol of luxury. Few people knew that he was a general in the U.S. military who had led many important campaigns and received many prestigious medals. Today, Jonathan decided to reward himself with a peaceful evening after many years of dedication to his country. He chose a table near the window where he could see the city lights and the bustling people outside. The waiter politely brought him a menu and poured him a glass of water. Jonathan smiled and thanked him in a warm, calm voice. As Jonathan sat enjoying the quiet, the door to the restaurant opened. A group of men entered talking loudly. Leading the group was Chief of Police Robert Turner. Robert was a large, middle-aged white man with a smug expression on his face. As the chief of police in the city for more than a decade, Robert was used to being feared and pampered. Robert looked around the restaurant, his eyes stopping at the table by the window. The table he always considered his whenever he came here. But today was occupied by a black man he had never seen before. "What the hell?" Robert muttered. Frustration rises in his chest. He walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down beside Jonathan without asking permission. Jonathan looked up, his eyes still calm. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Robert smirked, glancing Jonathan up and down. "I think you're at the wrong table," he said, his tone laced with sarcasm. Jonathan frowned slightly, but remained polite. "I've sat here before, and I have no problem with this seat." Robert laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "Do you know who I am?" "No, and I don't think it matters," Jonathan replied, his voice calm. Robert leaned forward, his face hard. "I am the sheriff of the city, and this table, it has been mine every time I have been here. So I suggest you get up and move to another table." Immediately, the atmosphere in the restaurant became tense. Nearby diner began to pay attention to the conversation between the two men. Jonathan leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. "I don't think this restaurant has any rules about reserved tables, Sheriff. If I'm wrong, you can have a staff member come and confirm." Jonathan's reply made Robert angry. "Do you know who you're talking to? I don't need the staff here to confirm anything. When I say you have to go, you have to go." Jonathan, a sip of water, his eyes becoming serious. "I respect your position, but your authority does not apply here. This is a public restaurant, not a police station. If you are not satisfied, you can ask the manager to handle it." Robert slammed his hand down on the table, rattling Jonathan's glass. "Listen, old man, I don't need anyone to teach me my rights. If you don't leave, I'll make you regret ever challenging me." Jonathan remained silent for a few seconds, looking Robert straight in the eye. "Chief, I advise you to be careful with your words and actions. A man like you should understand the consequences of abusing your power." "Careful?" Robert laughed, but his laugh was mocking. "Consequences? Who do you think you are to warn me?" At this point, the restaurant manager noticed the argument and stepped forward. He seemed confused, not knowing how to handle the situation when he realized that on one side was a police chief and on the other side was a customer he did not know. Robert turned to the manager and shouted, "Tell him to leave this place immediately. This table is mine." The manager faltered, glancing at Jonathan as if to apologize. But before he could say anything, Jonathan spoke up. "I'm not going anywhere. I've been sitting here and I've done nothing wrong. If you want me to leave, give me a good reason." Robert roared, feeling as if his authority was being challenged in front of everyone. He gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot with anger. "Fine, you want to play hard. Then we'll see who goes." The atmosphere in the restaurant became more stifling than ever. The surrounding diners did not dare to intervene, but could not take their eyes off this tense situation either. Jonathan remained calm, but a sharp warning flashed in his eyes. He knew that this was not the end of it, and that Robert Turner's arrogance would cost him dearly. "All right, old man," Robert said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I gave a chance to leave gracefully, but since you refused, I'll have to resort to drastic measures." Jonathan remained calm, but there was determination in his eyes. He put down his glass of water on the table, his voice low and clear. "Mr. Turner, if you continue to behave like this, the consequences will not stop at losing this table. I advise you to think carefully." Robert laughed out loud. "Consequences? Who do you think you're threat? I'm the sheriff. This is my city. I make the rules." Before Jonathan could reply, Robert pulled a pistol from the holster at his waist and raised it threateningly. A gasp of horror rang out from the onlookers. For the last time, Robert said, his voice cold, "Stand up and leave this table, or I will make you regret it." Jonathan did not flinch at the threat. He stared at the gun, then slowly raised head, his eyes fixed on Robert. "What do you think you're doing?" Jonathan asked, his voice calm but authoritative. "I'm doing my job," Robert replied, "getting rid of people who don't belong here." "Don't belong here," Jonathan repeated, his eyes sharp. "You mean because I'm a black man in a fancy restaurant?" Robert narrowed his eyes. "I don't care who you are. You're taking my place, and I won't allow it." At this point, the tension had reached its peak. Some diners began to take out their phones to film the whole thing, while the restaurant staff were at a loss for what to do. The manager tried to calm them down. "Mr. Turner, please calm down. This is not the way to solve the problem." "Shut up," Robert shouted, not even looking at the manager. "Don't meddle in my business." Jonathan slowly reached into his vest pocket, an action that made Robert tense up and tighten his grip on his gun. "Stop! Don't move!" Robert yelled, causing some of the customers to scream in fear. But Jonathan was undaunted. He pulled out a phone, calmly dialed a number, and held it to his ear. "This is Jonathan Harris," he said into the phone, his voice clear. "And I need immediate assistance. I am being held at gunpoint by a local police officer at a Central Avenue restaurant. Please contact the Department of Justice." Jonathan's words stunned Robert for a moment. "What you say?" Robert asked, his tone filled with doubt. Jonathan put the phone down on the table, facing Robert with a cold gaze. "I think you will get a call from your superior soon. Be prepared." Robert smirked. "Who do you think you are calling the Justice Department?" "A stupid old black man. Don't make me laugh." But a few seconds later, Robert's phone rang. He picked it up, looking annoyed. "This is Turn," he said, but his face quickly changed color when he heard the other end. Mr. Secretary." The voice on the other end of the line was clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Robert Turner, you have overstepped your bounds. Lay down your weapon immediately. We will send someone to investigate your actions, and I warn you, any further action will only make your situation worse." Robert, speechless. He turned to look at Jonathan, his complacency gone, replaced by confusion and fear. Jonathan just sat there, his expression calm but with an undeniable dignity. Robert put the gun down on the table, his hands shaking. I don't know who you are," he said softly, his voice full of worry. Jonathan stood up and walked slowly to face Robert. "I tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. You brought the consequences on yourself." Jonathan's words were like a sentence of condemnation, and Robert knew that things would never be the same again. Jonathan left in silence, but he knew this story was just beginning. The next morning, local television stations aired the video repeatedly while journalists questioned Robert's actions. Small protests began to take place in the city, demanding an explanation. Many held signs that read "Justice for Jonathan Harris" and "No to Racism." In the sheriff's office, Robert Turner sat alone, sweat pouring down his forehead. He had received an urgent summons from the Justice Department, and the entire agency's senior staff was discussing what to do. Mr. Turner, an advisor, entered, his face grave. "This situation is out of control. We need to make a public statement." Robert slammed the table. "What statement? I was just exercising my authority. He shouldn't be sitting there," and I asked very politely. "Very polite?" the advisor asked, his eyes sharp. "Mr. Turner, you pointed a gun at an unarmed citizen in a public place. You didn't even know who he was. You have disgraced the entire force." Robert was about to protest, but there was a loud knock on the door. The door opened and two federal agents entered with stern faces. "Mr. Robert Turner, you are under investigation for abuse of power and violation of civil rights." One of them said, his voice called, "We need you to surrender your weapon and badge immediately." The room fell silent. Robert tried to keep his composure, but his shaking hands could not hide his confusion. He removed the badge from his shirt and placed it on the table along with the gun, then quietly followed the two agents. Meanwhile, Jonathan Harris calmly continued his daily work. He did not seek to stir up public opinion, but what had happened could not be ignored. Several reporters approached him trying to interview him, but Jonathan refused. "I don't need to say anything more," he said, his eyes deep. "Mr. Turner's actions speak for themselves. I just hope this leads to a positive change in the way people view and treat each other." Jonathan's relatives and former comrades, however, could not stand idly by. A group of veterans who served under his command wrote an open letter to the city's mayor demanding a full investigation into the local police force. The storm only really erupted when Jonathan Harris's identity was revealed. On the evening news, Jonathan's image in uniform and decorated filled the screen. Reporters emphasized that he was a general in the United States Army who had devoted his life to protecting his country. Stories of his bravery and in war were told, from leading troops in the most dangerous areas to negotiating peace in times of crisis. He was more than just a soldier, a former comrade of Jonathan said in an interview. He was a symbol of leadership and courage. It's sad that he had to endure such discrimination. These revelations add to the pressure on Robert Turner. The question is not only why he behaved in such a racist manner, but also why he did not know someone of Jonathan's status and influence. A week after the Justice Department held a press conference, the spokesperson said that Robert Turner has been suspended and is facing a full investigation. The allegations include abuse of power, racial discrimination, and unlawful use of a weapon. Not only that, the Justice Department also announced that it would reform local police forces, including implementing anti-racism training programs and monitoring the behavior of officers. People wailed these measures, but many still demanded a public apology from Robert. However, Robert chose to remain silent. Jonathan Harris, although not actively seeking attention, has become a symbol of the fight against injustice. He is invited to many panels on equality and justice, where he shares his experiences and insights. "I don't want this to be my story," Jonathan said in a speech. "It's the story of millions of people who have suffered discrimination and injustice. We need to work to change that." At the end of the story, Robert Turner is dismissed from his position and loses all his job benefits. He becomes a typical example of what the abuse of power can lead to. Jonathan Harris, who faced injustice with patience and wisdom, went on to lead a normal life. But his story became an inspiration to millions, reminding them of the importance of fairness, determination, and courage. The restaurant where the incident occurred has a small plaque near the entrance, which records a quote from Jonathan: "Justice is not something we seek, but something we persistently defend." Thank you for taking the time to listen to the whole story. If you like this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with friends and family, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories.